And welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Just Parlays show here at the Max Wagers Network. I'm your co-host Guy Reichel, and joining me as always is Parlay Chris King. And together we're going to go through the Monday card, mostly betting. We do have a rare Monday Night Football college edition, which we'll get through, but also a lot of stuff to cover from this weekend. Just to recap. So first of all, Chris, speaking of the weekend, how was yours?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, there were some games that were disappointing, but in the end, yesterday turned out better than Saturday because some of those games didn't pan out how we expected. I didn't expect Utah to completely give the game away against Florida. How you throw an interception inside the 5-yard line in the last 20 seconds when all you need is a field goal to go to overtime anyway defies logic. But people said it looked like a trap line at 2.5, and it turned out that it was because Utah played down to the competition.
Yeah, it seemed to me that the line, I was leaning Utah in that game. I ended up not playing it because of the line. I just thought it was a little bit too, I'd say, sketchy. So I stayed away from that. But besides that game, there were a lot of really good college football games. I know in the college football show with Steen, I went 2-1. It was a classic tale of what happened last year. I won the first two plays. I'm going for the sweep, and some form of a bad beat cost me a 3-0. My only loss was a first quarter play. I had the under 12.5 in the Texas State game. 0 points in the first 10.5 minutes. Touchdown, immediate interception, 3rd and 10 draw play for 20 yards. And then Nevada scored another touchdown with about a minute to go in the quarter. So 14 points in the final 4 minutes of the quarter. And that was how I picked up my only college football loss of the weekend. Besides my personal bets, you had a couple crazy games in general. You had App State, North Carolina. You had the very underrated Wyoming Tulsa game, which was pretty fun. That went to multiple overtimes. You had the Houston UTSA game, and you also had the Liberty Bibberty Southern Miss game, which went to about 4 overtimes. And then you had yesterday's game. We're going to get into yesterday's game separately because that's a whole separate can of worms. But for the course of this entire weekend, what was your favorite college football game? A lot of really good choices for week one.
The masochist would say that the best game of the weekend was Iowa South Dakota State because nobody could score.
I had the plus 17. So that was one of my 2 picks I gave out on the college football show. Line went from 17 to 10.5 in a day. And I guess they knew Iowa was not going to score 11. So that was kind of the logic behind it. But yeah, that was also a fun one. Not if you were really watching it. To be honest, I did put it on in the second half because the curiosity was just too much for me to overcome.
I just kept watching punt, 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 punt.
It was the first time in a long time I've seen a team get punted to death. And that's what happened with South Dakota State. Because Iowa's punter had one of the best games I've ever seen. And South Dakota State, as a result of bad field position, were victimized by 2 safeties in the same game. So Iowa's punter was the unsung hero of the weekend. But do you actually have a favorite game that you watched and just thought that it was phenomenal content?
I think Arkansas-Cincinnati was a really good game, really.
Okay, that was one I also didn't mention. I mentioned all the ones that basically went to overtime or that involved some last-second event.
Or what about Rutgers? Rutgers came back, went on a 96 or so yard drive to beat Boston College.
Yeah, with a no real quarterback, which was really an impressive win for Rutgers. Embarrassing loss at home for Boston College. Is it fair for me to say, I've been saying this for a couple of years, I think Schiano is the most underrated coach in all of college football, and I actually think he's very, very good as a head coach. And people won't exactly admit it because of the fact that he comes with a lot of baggage. He had his situation at Penn State. He also had the NFL with the Buccaneers and how that unfolded and whatever. But do you think Schiano is extremely underrated because he somehow wins games at Rutgers, and you look at his overall team, and you're not sure how they win more than 3 games in a given season?
Yeah, I mean, he gets probably more than what you would expect out of the talent that he has.
And that's what you look for a coach. I mean, if the argument is, unlike, we'll segue into it, Norvell, who might make games more interesting than they should be, the fact that Schiano is able to win 5-6 games a year with Rutgers of all teams tells you if he ended up not having to drop out of the Tennessee job, which he took a couple years ago, he might be doing really well with very good players on his roster.
Yeah, that's true. You have to wonder if Rutgers could ever get some talent. Could they, challenge in the Big Ten? And the sad part is we'll never find out because Rutgers will never get that kind of talent to compete with the Ohio States and the Michigans.
Yeah, it's not even about challenging. It's about actually not being a total bottom feeder. And before Shiano got there, they were winning like one game every 3 years. It was like Kansas under the Les Miles era. And yet Shiano showed up and they randomly made a bowl game last year. Yes, there was a technicality in there because a team dropped out because of COVID and Rutgers ended up getting a bowl game they wouldn't have gotten originally. They still went 5-7. I mean, if I told you Rutgers would win 5 games, you'd probably assume it would take the 3 to 4 years. He did it in 1 year.
Sadly, that's accurate because, nobody has a ton of faith. You look at Rutgers and it's like looking at UConn on your schedule and you're like, well, who cares?
Yeah, but the point is you're looking at Rutgers in particular, and I think the fact that Shiano's able to win 4+ games every year tells you how good of a coach he is. And yes, I don't condone anything that happened over at Penn State when he was there, but I have to at least acknowledge the guy can coach.
True.
So that's how I look at it. But you mentioned the Rutgers game. That was your favorite game of the Cincinnati game?
Yeah, I like the way Arkansas responded in crunch time in that game.
That second half was fantastic.
It was.
But I don't know what my favorite game was because the Florida State game was honestly awful for an entire half. And I guess that's why I'm also a bit against the Cincinnati game. It's because the first half was just a bunch of missed field goals by Cincinnati. And then the game picked up in the second half. I think if I was picking my favorite game from the weekend, it probably would have been the App State game. That game was everything I wanted and more. Also because I had the over at 56, which I thought was one of the dumbest totals on the entire board. The game went over by 68 points. 68 points the game went over by. I thought that game was everything I could ask for because I love seeing shootouts and I prefer optional defense games if I had to choose one or the two. So you had a crazy, crazy ending there where a returner should go down on an onside kick. He doesn't. He scores a touchdown, gives the ball back to App State. They end up scoring another touchdown, and they failed another 2-point conversion. So if I was going based on crazy, unique endings that were entertaining from start to finish, I think the App State game was the best game of the weekend, but the best finish of the weekend was the Florida State game.
Well, and don't forget, the NC State East Carolina game. East Carolina had multiple chances to win that game.
That's true, too.
Had an extra point they missed, then they missed a field goal at the end of the game.
Unfortunately, I missed most of that game because it was happening at the same time as the North Carolina game. But I did catch the final 2-3 minutes of that NC State game. Yeah, not a great weekend for college kickers.
Yeah, Frank saying Illinois was in Indiana was a great game Friday night, even though he lost money on Illinois. I thought Illinois, and we talked about this Friday night when the game was going on.
They're both trying to lose the game.
Yeah. Illinois had multiple chances to punch the ball in from inside the 1 yard line. And on that fourth down play, it looked like they tried to run a quick snap and try to catch them off guard, but they weren't set either.
No, and they got blown back by about 3 yards on fourth down. And then you had a bunch of turnovers down the stretch. Very, very nice drive, though, by Basilik to lead Indiana to the win. Props to him. Both teams are not exactly good, but when you have two somewhat even teams against each other, you're going to see a very good game. That was kind of my takeaway from Florida State LSU. I didn't think either team was particularly solid. I thought they were fine. Watching them, they looked like a 7-win team against a 6-win team, but they were evenly matched, and you had a very good finish to it. But is it an overreaction to say that the Florida State LSU final 2-3 minutes might have been the greatest 2-3 minutes I've ever seen in a football game?
Well, nobody can say it's an overreaction if you're saying the greatest 2 or 3 minutes you've seen. The only one who can say it's an overreaction then is
it's
you.
A completely subjective take, but when it comes down to crazy college football endings or even football endings in general, I'm sure everyone has their favorite. Most people would probably say Boise State Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl. I think that's probably on the short list for a lot of people. You can talk about the Texas USC title game. You have the Clemson Alabama title game. There's a lot of good options if you want to talk about back and forths, some thrilling comebacks. You have the Flutie game. There's a lot of games to choose from over college football history. I can't describe anything similar to what I saw in the final 2-3 minutes of that LSU Florida State game.
Well, you saw horrible play calling by Florida State. You saw
that I've seen before, but the actual way it unfolded with LSU scoring to cut it to 7. And at that point, I figured, all right, Florida State's easily going 3 and out, and LSU's probably going to win the game. They went 3 and out. I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I expected from Norvell. And they punted it away, and LSU fumbles the punt again, the same guy 2 times. And then Florida gets the ball at the 3. So you're like, okay, I mean, Florida State's just going to probably run 3 handoffs, burn the timeouts, kick a field goal or score a touchdown, and the game's over. Then they fumble on 3rd and goal on a pitch play. I don't know why you're calling a pitch play on 3rd and goal at the 1. They fumble. LSU goes 99 yards in about 1 minute and 20 seconds, scores a touchdown with no time left, and then gets the extra point blocked. It's one of the craziest endings to a game I've ever seen, and I don't really know how you can top it, because even though there's a lot of crazy ways to end a college football game, I have never seen a game end that way, where you have a 99-yard drive that culminates in a buzzer beater mixed in with a blocked extra point. I don't think I've ever seen that before, and I don't think I'll ever see that again, because that's almost impossible.
Closest thing I can think of was the Saints.
The Saints lateral play with the missed extra point, right?
Yep, when John Carney missed the extra point afterwards.
But even that, I mean, that was also insane in its own right, but 99 yards, like the fumble leading up to the drive, there was so much that went on there that I think it's going to be almost impossible to find a better ending to a game. The closest thing I could think of for college football, which in my opinion might be also the best ending in recent memory, the Bahamas Bowl between Western Kentucky and Western Michigan. I think that is an all-time finish that also involved some type of play where the team made a miraculous comeback and still lost the game. But you had the 75-yard lateral touchdown there, and that was a bowl game as well. So I think that's also probably my top 3, that ending. But this one was something else.
Let's be honest, for what it was stupid special teams because you don't put the guy back out there after he fumbled one earlier.
It's also bad coaching from both sides.
True. Florida State couldn't tackle. We talked about that when Daniels had the Dak Prescott type run with 15 seconds left.
That was also the case in the first half. The issue was LSU just kept settling for field goals, but there were a couple of 3rd downs where Daniels clearly was under control, and yet Daniels made about 3 guys miss, and he converted a 1st down he had no business converting. That happened all game long.
And then, we had the whole replay thing with, did he get out of bounds? Did he not get out of bounds at the 1 or at the 2-yard line, whatever it was? Yeah, like you said, it was bad coaching on both sides. You don't run a pitch play when you could have just taken a knee and run 35 or 40 seconds off and kicked the field goal and won the freaking game anyway. And
worst case is you don't run any time off, but you make them burn their last time out. I think they still had 1 left at that point. And yeah,
that's true. But if they had actually, played smarter football, maybe LSU uses those timeouts and then they don't have any left on that last drive.
Either way, the point is you take 3 knees, kick a field goal, you're up 10 with 1:30 to go. The game's over.
Right.
So you just had to not turn the ball over. But the coaching was not good on either side. Norvell, even though they won the game, should be fired. Like, I don't know what you need to see as an athletic director, what more you need to see, besides potentially blowing an almost impossible lead in that spot and think that Norvell's still the guy. Like, I know they're 2-0. It's a nice win against LSU. Norvell's a really, really bad head coach, and I think it was put on full display last night.
True. JC talking about, never bet on Pac teams traveling to the SEC. On the plus side, JC did get the San Diego State-Arizona game to go over. On the negative side, San Diego State lost to Arizona.
They didn't lose. They got buried in that game.
Especially when you figure that one of their touchdowns came when, Arizona blocked their own punt in the end zone.
Well, even though Arizona is supposed to be better, they got a bunch of transfers. I still don't know what San Diego State's doing. If I've roasted Iowa and a lot of these Big Ten schools for kind of just retreading awful quarterbacks and just trying to figure it out anyway, that was the best transfer option you had if you're San Diego State. Like, you haven't been able to throw the ball in like 10 years, and you bring in the Virginia Tech quarterback who could not throw last year. What did you think was going to happen?
I'm surprised that he only threw the ball 10 times.
Did you see his numbers? He can't throw. He had like 47 passing yards.
51. Come on, give the man
Whatever.
some credit.
He had 51 passing yards and an interception. I don't know what San Diego State's doing in terms of offense.
I like how he's been in college since 2017.
I'm just saying, at least try to target a quarterback that can actually throw the ball for once.
Well, but do you think the problem is that no quarterback that can throw the ball actually wants to go to San Diego State?
I think any JUCO quarterback that can throw, or any FCS guy. I'm not a fan of Reed for Western Kentucky. I think he's okay. You're telling me no FCS quarterback would consider going to San Diego State? I find that hard to believe. They want to play D1. They want to play FBS. I think you could find an FCS quarterback available that can at least throw the ball more than 20 yards.
Speaking of Austin Reed, he was 22 of 31 for 271 and 3 scores in the Hilltoppers win over Hawaii. Is this a sign that Hawaii is just really, 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 really bad?
Well, we knew this, and I gave out Western Kentucky minus the 16 on Clar. I know that Steen gave it out as one of his plays for the college football show. Michigan's favored by 50 next week.
Oh, great. I have to write that game this week, so that'll be interesting.
They're favored by half a hundo. And I'll tell you what, I'm not taking the points with Hawaii. This is one of the worst defensive teams I've seen in a long time. And you have a lot of really bad defenses. UMass usually every year gives up about 90 points a game.
You might as well just call them UMass.
Yeah, you can. But they're an independent. They don't have any expectations. They haven't been to a bowl game in an eternity. Hawaii was actually decent like 3 years ago when Rolovich was still there. And they completely just fell off a cliff. Graham completely just destroyed the entire program. But, I mean, they gave up 49 to Western Kentucky. They didn't score in the – did they score in the first quarter?
Yeah, right. They had that 4-play negative 20-yard drive.
No, Hawaii did. I'm saying, did Western Kentucky
Western Kentucky didn't score until the second.
That's what I'm saying. They scored 49 points and had 0 points in the first quarter. And they gave up 63 to Vandy. Like, this is one of the worst defenses in the country, and Michigan should probably score 60-plus points in this game.
By the way, that line's still climbing, Scott. It's now 51 or 51.5, depending on where you look. WinBet is the only one that still has it at 50 flat.
The only way I would play that game is team total over for Michigan. I'm
over
not laying
372.
I'm not laying 50-something and change worrying about garbage time. But at the end of the day, Michigan, they scored 50-something against Colorado State. They
51, I think.
They should score like 60 in this game.
This is one of those times when it brings back the Saturday Night Live skit of the super fans where, you pick the Bears 74-2.
Dub Bears.
In this case, it's going to be Michigan about 74 to maybe Hawaii will be lucky and get 2.
It's the growing pains of a full rebuild, but they lost like 50 or 60-something players and their entire coaching staff. This is the biggest ground zero rebuild I've seen since arguably my entire life. And you could argue it's one of the biggest ground up rebuilds since the death penalty SMU team?
Oh, yeah. Those were the days.
It is really, really bad.
In case you're wondering, Hawaii plus 4,000 on the money line. They don't even list a number for Michigan right now at BetMGM.
Michigan would probably be minus 10,000.
No, FanDuel has them at minus 100,000.
Okay, fair enough.
And Hawaii is plus 8,000 there.
I expect Michigan to win that game by 56. I think that game has like 63-7 written all over it, and that's probably where the game's going to end up. But Hawaii is one of the worst teams in the country, but they have a very, very nice stadium.
I was looking for a team total, but it's not. They're not out yet.
I got to assume, based on where the total is in the spread, it's going to be somewhere in the mid-50s. And
yeah, the total itself 65.5.
But yeah, there's a lot of fun lines that are available. All the big favorites basically cashed over the weekend. If you were laying 3-4 touchdowns, you probably won because basically every single team covered that was laying about 3 or 4 touchdowns. Alabama looked great. Georgia looked great. Ohio State did not. They won the game anyway, but Ohio State, I was not impressed. I feel like most people were not. I feel like it's pretty safe to say we're just on pace for another Bama-Georgia title game. Can I say
At this
that?
point, yeah, at this point you have to. I mean,
Clemson didn't play yet, so we'll see. But in reality, it looks like Bama and Georgia are playing different sports compared to everyone else. It's really just not even close. And I think you're really just looking at the inevitable Bama, Georgia, undefeated conference title game. They're both going to make the playoff anyway. They'll probably play in the title game. It's going to be rinse repeat. I don't see how either of those teams are going to lose. And I know it's early, and they both, I can't even say they played nobody because Oregon was ranked, and Georgia beat them by 40 and change. Bama didn't play anybody. Utah State's not very good. But I don't know how I'm supposed to expect any team in college to beat either of those two teams. Those teams are just pro football teams disguised as college teams.
To be fair, I don't know if we can say Utah State's not any good. We did say that we think they'll be good in the Mountain West.
Relatively speaking. I know that they're good in the Mountain West. I'm saying in general, they're not going to be ranked. They're not going to be whatever. They're not a serious threat for a playoff caliber. Neither is Oregon, but you understand my point. Bama and Georgia are just light years ahead of everyone else. There's just nobody near him.
Scott said that he could pass for more yards than Burmeister, and he's 55.
That sounds about right.
And he also cashed in the Western Kentucky game. It was the most confident game of the week. And basically, anybody that plays Hawaii, you might as well just go and bet the house on it.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that the bookmakers got absolutely killed. You can probably make an argument that the Hawaii game was their worst result because you had a lot of people that were blindly betting Hawaii fading Hawaii from the get-go, went from about 9 to 16.5. And then you had everybody that got their asses kicked during the entire day going back to the Hawaii bailout special at midnight. And, they were all laying it on Western Kentucky. I don't have proof of it. I'd assume that the Hawaii game was probably the worst result for the house.
I would agree. JC also pointing out BYU looked decent as an easy cover. How they were only favored by 11.5 points against South Florida, a team that has absolutely been a dumpster fire for an eternity.
What was that, 21-0 after a quarter, 28-0 after a quarter?
It was like 21-0 after like 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
They went on to win 50-21, mainly because, they didn't care anymore because the game was over.
I mean, Scott's a terrible coach. We know that he's a Clemson offensive coordinator, and he was solid at that. He also had a lot of talent to deal with, but he went to South Florida, and he's been a mess. And you don't know how long South Florida is going to keep waiting for the team to come around because they're clearly not coming around.
Yeah, basically that game with South Florida was over after 11 seconds. The first play from scrimmage, Puka Nacua ran 75 yards for a score, and it was 7-0.
Yeah, it was you just perfectly summed it up early on. It was a 3-possession game, roughly 8 minutes into the game. But the game was over. I'm sure people watching the game didn't think South Florida would get to 21 points, and they did not.
No, they got to 21.
Oh, sorry, they got to 21. Sorry. So you're looking at overtime after 8 minutes. BYU for 8 minutes versus 60 minutes of South Florida. You're going to overtime. No, South Florida's a bad team. Scott's a bad coach. And BYU is what we thought they'd be. They're a solid team. Are they going to compete for anything? Not really. I think they're going to be a solid ranked team for the entire season. They'll probably finish somewhere in the teens? Final ranking?
Yeah, I'd say somewhere between 15 and 19.
Yeah, they'll lose a game or two, but I like Hall as a quarterback. I like their actual team. The offensive line is full of a bunch of 29-year-olds. They're going to dominate up front, but they have a solid team, and South Florida doesn't. So there you go.
Sucks to be South Florida.
Andrew also mentioned in the Wisconsin game, Wisconsin covered 36.5. They won 38-0. It was the exact carbon copy of the Minnesota game. It's a pretty bad beat, though, if you had Illinois State, though, because the first 2 touchdowns Wisconsin had, 100-yard pick six and the 96-yard touchdown run. So Illinois State went from almost scoring to start the game to an 100-yard pick six and then pinned Wisconsin deep and gave up an immediate big strike touchdown. So, yeah, I don't want to say it was a bad beat for Illinois State, but they had a serious shot to cover it.
Yeah, I mean, are you surprised that the game stayed under the total?
With
So
Wisconsin?
42 and a half?
No, Wisconsin can't throw the ball. If you look at the numbers, Mertz against all these garbage teams never throws. The only time he ever threw was like his first game against Western Kentucky a couple years ago. But they ran the ball down their throat. Allen had 100 and whatever yards on basically like 10 carries. And Wisconsin said, Mertz, we know you're bad. You're not going to throw the ball. And that's how the game went. So
yeah, and that pick six, it was a real backbreaker for Illinois State. They had gone 15 plays and 71 yards, chewed up almost 9 minutes off the clock, only to have it end, badly.
It's a 10-point swing, minimum. Could have been a 14-point swing.
I mean, that's just rough.
Very rough, especially when you're getting 36 and a half. But
this is also true.
Do you have anything else though you want to add about the weekend, or do you think we basically covered everything?
I think do me a favor. Can you look up, because I was trying to pull out Caesar's book before and I couldn't. I wanted to see what the number was for Shipley to go over or to score a touchdown, because I saw earlier that they had it at minus 133 and everybody else had it at like minus 250.
Bet online at minus 200.
Yeah, I'm just curious if Caesar still has it that far down.
I did not check. I believe player props are not available in college in New York. I actually have a play on that. We're going to talk about the Clemson game in a bit. But as far as I know, I don't believe player props are available in New York. So I probably...
Yeah, but you're close enough to New Jersey that you could pull it
up. No, but I'm saying my browser automatically goes to the New York site, so I'm not sure if it's going to...
Oh, see, mine just comes up and asks me for a state, so I just punched it in.
Oh. Yeah, I don't see it here. So if that is the case, slam it. But, yeah, we'll talk about that. I didn't realize it was at 1:30 on Caesars. But either way, I think that's kind of going to do it for the recap. Didn't go through much of baseball. I was very, very close for my weekend prediction. I said the Yankees would get swept at the Trop. They lost the first two. I made a lot of money on the Saturday game. And then on the Sunday game, I took the Rays again, and they got hosed by a strike three call. I'm not going to say that it was a bad beat because you're still trailing by 1 in the ninth, but it's always unfortunate when the umpires take over a pretty meaningful game for both teams.
Well, like I said, it was Vic Carapazza, and if there's a guy outside of Angel Hernandez that you don't want behind the plate, if you're a team that's trailing late, it's him.
Yeah, but that was definitely an unfortunate way to lose a bet for me. JC wanted me to briefly mention the end of the Seattle and Las Vegas WNBA game, which was absolutely wild, which I actually ended up watching. Long story short, you had a back-and-forth game the entire way. Then Seattle was leading. You had a layup by Wilson to give them the lead again. Then Sue Bird hit a three-pointer in the corner with about 1.5 seconds left. And then Vegas had a layup at the buzzer to send the game to overtime. So you had 3 separate go-ahead baskets in about the final 5 seconds.
That was the last 3 seconds, they said.
The last 3?
Yeah.
Either way, point is, it was a very, very crazy couple of possessions, very, very high quality in terms of execution, but awful defense on the final inbound by Seattle, and then Vegas absolutely murdered them in overtime. I don't want to look too far ahead for Game 4. I don't know how Seattle comes back from that. You have your veteran leader, the person who's about to hit probably the most iconic shot of her legendary Hall of Fame career, and you still lose the game. Show overtime. I got to assume Seattle loses Game 4. I don't know how you can possibly come back from that. Do you?
I don't either. I think, they played almost flawless basketball for such a long period, and then in overtime they just were flat. It's tough when you get give up a thing like that. That's why we said if LSU had kicked the extra point and made it yesterday, they would have had all the momentum going into overtime. You would have basically thought Florida State was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, the Seminoles blocked the extra point, so it was a moot point. But obviously, when you make a play like that late in regulation to force overtime, the team that comes back has all the momentum going into it, and that's what we saw with the Aces.
Yeah, definitely true. But based on what I saw at the end of Game 3 and how Seattle responded in overtime, I think they're dead to rights. But we'll
By the
see.
way,
We'll see what happens.
the Yankees just coughed up that 2-run lead as ex-Yankee Gary Sanchez.
Yeah, according to ESPN, it said the home run was 473 feet. I didn't see it, but that sounds like an absolute bomb. I'm gonna have to look that up because I'm assuming he just absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, it says he homered to left.
Yeah. So, well, of course it's Sanchez. Of course he pulled it to the left. But yeah, Tyone was battling a bit for the first couple innings. Managed to get in and out of trouble, and then it seemed like Sanchez burned him. But either way, it's still early. We'll see
I
what
wonder if
happens
Archer's
there.
going to actually pitch out of the fifth.
Probably not. We'll see. I don't know. He's at 68 pitches, so we'll see.
But he hasn't gotten an out in the sixth inning, I think, all year.
Yeah, I doubt he's going to go that far. But
meanwhile,
anyway,
in the other game that's going on, the Blue Jays up 3-1 in the fifth on the Orioles. That matchup, Gaussman and Mike Bauman. Don't forget, these teams will play again in about 2 hours, depending on how quickly this game ends.
Yeah, it's the immediate doubleheader instead of the 4-hour gap that you occasionally get for some of them. But either way, to look through the actual card for tonight, I know you have a couple of plays, but we do want to go through some of the housekeeping stuff first. First of all, you might have noticed we have a new little small sportsbook plug there at the top of the screen. And it's not the same one that we've had for the past month because we have a new sponsor. We have a deal for Caesars, and Caesars Sportsbook has a great deal for first-time users. Get up to $1,250 in free bet insurance if you download the app today. Always check the state age limits and bet responsibly. But besides that, I know that Chris gives out a bunch of plays in addition to the free picks on this show, and you can find his premium plays over on the Winners and Winers website. Check the link in the show box below. Plus, check out both picks and parlays, plus Winners and Winers website and YouTube channels for free picks all day long. So, either way, Chris, I know that you absolutely crushed it on the premium side in parlays this past week. You want to talk about them?
We had some good ones. I mean, we had a bunch of 4-teamers. I missed the 6-teamer on Saturday. Saturday's when Ohtani pitched, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, because Houston lost in extra innings. That was a downer because that's when I was talking about Western Kentucky, because they were the other team I needed to come through. They did, and Houston didn't. But we've had a pretty good week on that front. Just on single plays, I think I was 14-4 or something like that last week. So it was a good week all around. Can't complain about it. I can complain that nobody pays attention to it, but that doesn't work because nobody pays attention to me complaining.
Well, that's why we're doing this thing. So we're causing people to pay attention to it. But 14-4 is definitely a solid week for anybody. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the prices are for your premiums, but 14-4 is kind of priceless if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I think I don't even know what they have them set at because
it's in the show. It's in the show description if you want to find it. Whatever. But
yeah, James said it had to be one of the worst boxing cards yesterday.
I didn't see it. I know that Ruiz, I believe, won by knockout. I think.
Sounds right.
But I don't really care much about boxing, to be honest. I follow some boxers, mostly the entertaining ones. But boxing isn't the same for me because every great fighter refuses to fight each other. And the fact that you've had to wait X amount of years to see Spence against Crawford's a joke. I mean, they were supposed to fight each other for 5 years already, and it's gone all the way back for a decade and change. People were calling for Mayweather-Pacquiao for like 7 years, and they finally fought, and Pacquiao was past his prime. And it didn't help. He tore a labrum, so he basically couldn't throw punches with one of his hands for the entire fight. That's one of the worst title fights of all time. But boxing has always done a really, really bad job at actually creating big fights nowadays because everyone's afraid of losing.
Yeah, I mean, the halcyon days of You had the middleweight division with Hagler and Hearns and Duran and Sugar
Even the
Ray
90s,
Leonard.
you go heavyweight division for the 90s, and they all would fight each other, and they'd kill each other.
True. But I mean, since then, it's gone right off a cliff as far as the level of competition goes. You see people beating up tomato cans, basically. It's like it reminds me of Rocky 1 when Rocky goes in and says he beat somebody. He's like, Nick's like, who'd you beat? He's like,
Oh, he was a bum.
Yeah, Spider. He's a bum.
Spider Rico is a bum. But I mean, you're trying to go through any of the high-profile fights that we've had for the last couple of years, and I'm trying to think what you even have. I mean, Crawford didn't fight against Spence. He's basically dominated in every fight he's ever been in. You had Spence, who's dominated every fight he's been in. I know he got derailed a bit because of the car accident or the motorcycle accident, which caused him to miss about a year or two. You had the Triple G Canelo fight, which was entertaining. I thought that Triple G got robbed in the first fight. And then the second one, Canelo might have won. I didn't see it. And now they're having the third one, even though Triple G's well past his prime. They're just having a third one for the hell of it. But
for the money. It's all about the money.
For the money, but I'm saying, like, is anyone thrilled about the trilogy? Like, I feel like most people could do without it. And I'm trying to think of other big fights. You had the trilogy between Fury and Wilder, which, I mean, I think Fury's the much better boxer. I think he always was. The fact that Wilder was being kind of pointed as this next phenom, even though his overall boxing execution and technique wasn't very good, and the fact that Fury was coming off a 2-year drug bender and was still able to go to a draw against him, despite getting knocked down twice, tells you how much better Fury actually is as a boxer. And now Fury might fight Usyk. I just don't really care. I think Fury-Usyk would be a very good fight. That fight I would tune into to watch. But you're really grasping at straws for high-quality fights between two title-caliber boxers in any given weight class because they'd all rather fight tomato cans and be 45-0.
Yeah, everybody, wants to be basically what Mayweather is now because, Mayweather got past Rocky Marciano's mark, but at least Marciano wasn't fighting a bunch of tin cans back in those days,
And I'm not afraid to admit it, Mayweather's my least favorite boxer of all time. Now, I recognize how talented he is as a defensive boxer, and I recognize he's arguably the best businessman of any boxer of all time because he made that much money, and he's continued to make that much money fighting Conor McGregor and fighting random people in Japan and making hundreds of millions of dollars every time. But Mayweather was a perfect example of a guy who would duck prime contenders until they were past his prime, win a boring-ass decision every time, and make a buttload of money. And now every other boxer has kind of tried to use that exact same formula. We're going to fight nobody. We're going to sell a bunch of pay-per-view cards, and we'll make a lot of money and retire 50-0. That's kind of what Mayweather completely did, and props to him for, making a lot of money doing that. But he kind of provided a blueprint to prevent any quality boxers from fighting against each other.
Yep. Because Roy Jones Jr. fought some good fights in the 90s.
Yeah, and I know his career went apart. Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson actually talked about potentially fighting in the 90s, and that ended up not happening, which is really a tragedy because that would have been a hell of a fight, both of them in their prime. But that apparently was in discussion, never actually happened. But boxing nowadays, not to mention all the controversial decisions with the judges and how you can't trust anybody with the scorecards, they don't actually want to fight each other. And they talk crap into each other in the media and quotes. They don't mean anything. And it's really just annoying at this point.
So who wins it? Who wins in a fight, Clubber Lang or Ivan Drago?
If I was actually picking between Prime Tyson and Prime Roy, I'm taking Tyson. I just think Tyson's too powerful. Roy's got speed. I get that. He's got quickness. I just think Tyson would completely dominate to the body. I think he'd hit him with a bunch of body shots, and I think eventually he'd wear him down. So if I was picking between the two, I'd pick Tyson. You?
Yeah, I would have to lean towards Tyson just because,
And I love Roy. But
when he throws punches, you hear them.
I think Roy would also get careless because he would also taunt a lot in the ring. You can't do that to Tyson. I think Tyson would eventually catch him slipping, if I had to guess.
How many rounds do you think it would go?
Are we going 15 round title fight? Like how what's the max that we're talking about here?
Yeah, you can say 15. I mean, that's the way it
No,
used to
I'm
be.
saying that's the max. I would probably pick Tyson in 9.
I thought you were going to say 7 or 8.
Yeah, I could have. I was thinking about it. I'd go 9, but I just think eventually he would catch Roy, and I think Roy would hit the canvas. But
Now, what about Clubber Lang and Ivan Drago?
Drago, he's got the reach. Drago
Scott.
versus Clubber is basically like watching George Foreman against Joe Frazier. Frazier got knocked down like 7 times in the first 3 rounds, and it wasn't even his fault. He just walked into jabs and power punches because he had to get on the inside. Yeah, Drago is kind of like the most unstoppable fighter of all time. And the fact that Rocky beat him actually makes just no sense. But, that's a separate story.
Scott said 5 rounds at best. Andrew says 2.
I'm not going to be disrespectful to Roy Jones, but if we're talking about Customato Tyson, he wins that fight. That's all
I
I'm
would
saying.
agree with that.
Don King Tyson, I think you have a case for Roy Jones Jr.
James said Mayweather's his favorite of all time. And he said back in those days there was no technique. It was just dudes in there hammering each other playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Yeah, but Rock'em Sock'em Robots is fun.
That's what I want to watch.
I mean, watch the first 3 minutes of Hagler and Hearns.
Just watch the whole fight. The whole fight's about 5.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a little longer. It's about 8 minutes, but still.
Whatever.
And just watch the war that those two dudes put on for 8.5 minutes, just beating the living crap out. Nobody wants to watch the clinch and grab. I mean, it's the left wing lock and the neutral zone trap of hockey. That's what boxing is. It's a hugging competition.
And once again, I recognize how talented Floyd is. He basically perfected the Pernell Whitaker style of defensive fighting. I'm just saying it's boring to watch, and I refuse to pay for any pay-per-views. I never have. You can like Mayweather, and I know that he beat Canelo. I never said he was bad. He's just a boring fighter, and that's why I don't like him.
Unknown said he waited on Tommy Hearns and his family once.
I mean, if you're asking me right now who I'd rather pay to see, Mayweather or Pacquiao, I'm picking Pacquiao 10 times out of 10. But anyway, got a little bit off topic there talking about boxing because of what happened this weekend. You want to pivot into some of the action today? I don't know if you have anything on the college football game. Do you?
No, because I didn't want to touch the line. But, I mean, we can talk about it for sure because it's the only college game there is to finish out week 1 point whatever.
I was going to say, because we could have started talking about the actual plays you had. I wasn't sure if you had college football, so we'll start there. You have Clemson taking on a Georgia Tech team that should probably not be very good. Clemson's favored by a lot of points. What else is new? On the road, favored by about 23, I believe.
Yeah, last I saw it was like 23 or 23 and a half.
Total in this one is in the low 50s, roughly 51. Clemson should be better this season, but they still have DJ as their quarterback, and I think that he's not very good. Now, they do have a very solid freshman who's a backup that Clemson fans are praying starts at some point because he's apparently light years better than DJ. But I see the line mostly at 24 now, actually, so there has been more Clemson money coming in. First of all, do you want to make a case for Georgia Tech to cover this spread? They're not going to win the game. Clemson's obviously going to win. We're not going to talk about it that way.
Right.
Do you think Georgia Tech can keep it within 21 points?
Well, I mean, you look at the game last year, and the final score was 14-8. Now, sure, Clemson's got all of these guys on offense. They got a very good defense. They've also got 2 new coordinators because, Venables is gone. He's at Oklahoma. Tony Elliott is in Virginia. How are these new coaches going to mesh in with, especially on the offense side of the ball? Like you said, Uiagalelei was horrible last year. And everybody down here keeps talking about how Klubnik should be the starter, but Swinney's basically come to the point where, he's not going to play unless it's a blowout or, DJ gets hurt. Sooner or later, that's going to come back and it's going to bite Clemson. Because in a close game, I don't want Uiagalelei out there throwing the ball, trying to move the team down the field. They don't have any really proven receivers unless you count Bo Collins, who was questionable last I saw. Georgia Tech, no, they're not great. They lost Gibbs. He transferred to Alabama. They did get Dylan McDuffie from Buffalo. They still got Jeff Sims.
I don't
And
know
I
if
think
Sims is actually good or not, but he's mobile, and that's all they got.
he's better than the guys that they played when Sims didn't play last year.
He reminds me of Jaden Daniels, who we watched yesterday. I think they're pretty similar players.
True. But, for all the talk about how Clemson is great, like I said, they scored 14 points last year against Georgia Tech.
They also still won 10 games, which is crazy because Clemson, you look back on last year and they were awful if you watch them, at least offensively. Defensively, they were incredible. They won 10 games. Like, you look back and based on how people talk about that team, you think they won like 7. Like, they really had a decent record. They were just painful to watch every single week.
Yes, remember, people are used to them being in the national title game, or at least in the CFP. Last year, they played in the Cheez-It Bowl.
They kicked the crap out of Iowa State.
They won by 7.
Yeah, I know. Didn't actually kick the crap out of them, but they did when you watched the game, and yet Iowa State hung around because DJ didn't do anything. But Clemson's defense really took control of the game, from what I can recall.
Yeah, but you look. They, like I said, they struggled when it came to doing things with offensively. They scored 3 against Georgia in the opener. Sure, then they beat South Carolina State. Whoop-de-doo. They lost to NC State in overtime. They lost to Pitt. They beat Syracuse by 3. They beat Boston College by 6. They beat Louisville by 6. And none of those teams you can say were good teams last year.
And you could also read off the points for Clemson in each of those games. They had a hard time of even reaching like 28 points.
In those games, they had, like I said, 14 against Georgia Tech, 21 against NC State, 19 against Boston College, 17 against Syracuse, 17 against Pitt. They got to 30 against Florida State, Louisville, and South Carolina in the season finale.
The Florida State one was misleading, though, because they had the fumble return touchdown at the buzzer, which covered the spread and sent the game over. So they actually didn't even get to 30 in that game. That took a miracle lateral fail fumble touchdown.
Right, and then they had 20 against Iowa State. You can point out that they went over 43 times. Look, you beat South Carolina State, you beat UConn, and then they put up 48 against Wake.
Yeah, Wake Forest they killed. I mean that I remember, but I do have a play on this game. It's a prop. I took Shipley over 80.5 rushing yards at I believe minus 126. My logic was I think Clemson's going to dominate up front on both sides of the ball. Georgia Tech lost in, I believe it was 8 of their 11 leading tacklers last year. So defensively, they should be awful. But I still don't trust DJ to throw the ball. Shipley's good. And Clemson really hit another gear last year, or at least became tolerable offensively once they started giving Shipley roughly 20 carries per game, and he became the main focal point of the offense. As long as DJ is the quarterback, I got to assume Clemson's going to limit the risk, and they're going to try to run the ball more. I think Clemson runs it down their throats.
I think they pretty much have to when you get right down to it. Nobody wants DJ to throw the ball. I don't think there's people.
It was 80.5. Like, I don't know how many carries do you think Shipley needs to go over 80.5? Like 17, maybe less.
Yeah, give or take. But that's why I was talking about the touchdown prop. If you can still get it at Caesars when it was minus 133, he scored in 7 of the 10 games he played in last year, and the teams that kept him out of the end zone were Georgia, Louisville, and I don't remember the other team off the top of my head, but he only ran the ball, I think, 29 times combined in those 3 games. He's going to get the ball a lot in this one.
He should. So I got his rushing yards over. I think that number's way too low. I think this is a classic Shipley game where he'll go for either like 20 carries, 120 yards, maybe a 50-yard run in there. I just think that Shipley's eventually going to find a way to either break one or just average like 7 yards a carry, and he'll just go over.
But don't.
They also have Kobe, who I think is pretty good, though.
Yeah, Kobe Pace and Phil Maffa is also in the mix too.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got 3 guys they can rotate in and out of there. So it's going to be interesting, but I think that him going over 80.5 is probably a pretty safe bet because why throw the ball if you don't have to?
Yeah, and even though they do have a committee, Shipley's still the number 1 guy. So I think that Kobe's going to be more of a change of pace guy, or worst case is 1A, 1B. But Clemson should be dominating the entire game Whether they cover or not is a different story. But with them winning, if the game's even close, that just means the starters play more. And Clemson should be trying to nurse a double-digit lead at some point in the fourth quarter.
JR asked if we have fade teams this college football season. He says he has UMass, New Mexico State, and Monroe. If you don't have Hawaii on your list, I don't know why.
I don't know where I can put Hawaii because Hawaii is an obvious one of the worst teams in the country fade. The problem is the spreads are going to be so high against this team that I'm not sure when it's actually worth to potentially stop fading Hawaii. You're going to keep doing it until you get burned. But, I mean, they're getting 50. I think they're going to not cover. I think Michigan's going to cover the number. But when you're talking about fades, you got to at least talk about the actual lines. I know Tulane was laying about 28 against.
Yeah, I took Tulane minus the points because I knew UMass sucked.
That wasn't easy, but they covered. But UMass is a given. New Mexico State, I backed against Minnesota. And to be honest, they should have covered, but that team is atrocious. They're really, really bad. And UL Monroe, I actually did not watch much of, but I know that
they got stopped.
Yeah, Texas absolutely killed them. I feel like that's a good starting point. I think you have to add Hawaii in there. I mean, you can't lose to Vandy by 53 and not be on a fade list. Defensively, I would fade Wyoming. You can't give up 40-plus points to Tulsa and Illinois in the first two games of the season and not have me blindly fade your defense. That's another kind of team to follow. But I feel like that's a pretty good starting point.
Speaking of New Mexico State, Scott, in 2 weeks.
Also, maybe Texas State. Maybe Texas State. You can't get blown out by Nevada by 24 points. That can't happen.
In 2 weeks, on the 24th, Hawaii goes to New Mexico State. That'll be a barn burner.
I actually don't even know what to think of that game at all. I got nothing, to be honest. Do you have anything for that? I got nothing.
I mean, you'd have to lead New Mexico State because they're at home.
I guess. I don't know.
And next week, Hawaii hosts Duquesne. I'll be interested to see what the line comes out for that game.
I think you're probably worth putting a little sprinkle on Duquesne. Hawaii's going to be favored. I don't think that they'll be favored by much. It might be similar to like a UConn versus, I forgot who they played last year, but they played some FCS school. Was it Yale?
That's the only team UConn beat.
Yale was favored, I think, in that game.
Yeah.
I personally think that you'll see Hawaii -3 in that game. I'll take Duquesne, but I think Hawaii will be favored in that one.
Taking Duquesne with the points. Might be the only time you say that even in basketball season.
Yeah, but anyway, I know we're at the 53-minute mark. We haven't really talked about any of your plays. Let's get the show on the road.
First, Jeffrey wants to know, is there any value in the Garfia match tonight?
Well, Alcaraz, I think, is going to win against Cilic. The problem is finding value. He just kicked the crap out of Cilic a couple weeks ago. I think he should probably win in either 3 or 4. I don't think there's much value. I think your best option is a parlay piece, maybe 1.5 sets on Alcaraz. It's a pretty decent minus price, but that's why I set a parlay piece. I think he'll win in 3 or 4. I think Cilic is a good player, but there's a few too many unforced errors. Alcaraz's court coverage is a bit too much. I think Alcaraz will win the match in 3 or 4 sets.
And what do you make of Kyrgios moving on?
I had the over in that match, which lost because Medvedev completely imploded in the final set. That was not fun. I'm not surprised Kyrgios won because he's just kind of owned Medvedev head-to-head. And Kyrgios, when he's on, is arguably the most talented tennis player on the planet. When he's
at a basket case and trying to be John McEnroe 2.0.
It's a big if, but he beat Medvedev. He has Kakanov up next round. Then he's facing off against either Berrettini or Rude, Nadal and Alcaraz or Sinner or somebody. They're going to kill each other. I think Kyrgios actually has a shot to win this thing. I don't know if he's going to do it, but if you watched him against Medvedev yesterday, that's a top 5 player in the world. Probably a top 3 player in the world. He was that.
Do you think he could be number 1 if he wasn't such a head case?
The rankings are extremely flawed because they support quantity over quality. if you're in a bunch of tournaments, then you're more likely to be ranked high. But if you only play 1 or 2 tournaments every couple months, you're never going to move up that much. So Kyrgios made the finals of Wimbledon. They didn't provide any points for Wimbledon, so Kyrgios would have been number 12 going into this event if they counted Wimbledon. They didn't, so he's number 20 and change. He doesn't play enough tournaments, so he wouldn't be number 1. I mean, Djokovic is like number 8 because of COVID and how he couldn't play in any of these events, but Djokovic is easily the number 1 player in the world, and that's not going to change. So it depends on how you actually perceive the rankings. They don't mean anything. But Kyrgios, in terms of talent and current form, that's a top 3 player in the world that I saw play yesterday. He was that good.
And one last thing before we move on, Scott, what do you make of the Cowboys signing 40-year-old Jason Peters to play tackle?
What else are they supposed to do? The season starts for them on Sunday.
Is Nate Newton unavailable?
I'm saying you don't have any options. Is Nate Newton dead?
Is he? I didn't think he was.
I thought he was dead.
I'll have to look.
Is Newton
Nope,
dead?
he's still alive. He's just 60 and fat.
Okay, he's still alive. There's the other one that died.
Which one?
I don't know. Wait, was Newton the car accident guy? Who was the car accident guy? I thought somebody died on that team. Or maybe he didn't die. Maybe he just had a career-ending injury. I forgot the name of the guy. But, yeah. Either way, point is you're asking me, do I think it's a good signing? What else are you supposed to do? You lost your left tackle right before the season started. You have no other options. All the good free agent tackles already signed somewhere because why would they be available? And you signed a former Pro Bowler who gets injured every year who's 40 and change. Is it going to work? No, because Peters gets hurt every year and he's past his prime. But if you're the Cowboys, what are you supposed to do? You sign anybody that could give you one good week. That's it. Like, it's not a bad signing, it's just not going to work.
Andrew said, will Coco beat Iga?
Swiatek has really not been that great on hard court this year. She's been struggling. Goff's been good. I'll give it to her. You know, she had a nice comeback there in the second set against Zhang. Won that match, I believe, 7-5, 7-5. She kicked the crap out of Madison Keys. Keys is a bit of a psycho, though, but that's still a nice win. I would take the over in that match. I think Coco against Swiatek probably goes 3 sets. I think Coco's got a shot because, you know, the crowd's going to be behind her.
True. And everybody's favorite, Scott, Ryan Mountcastle just doubled home run for Baltimore. It's 3-2.
Of course he does. He owns Toronto.
Yeah, I wonder what his numbers are against Toronto for the year. He's probably hitting about 700 with about 400 home runs and 62 RBIs.
By the way, Archer officially went 5 innings. He has been pulled for the start of the 6th.
What a surprise.
Just letting you know. He did not pitch in the 6th.
He never pitches it. He's a useless piece of crap. How he still has a job is beyond me. By the way, Mountcastle going into today, 13 for 37, so a 351 average, 9 runs scored, 4 doubles, 5 homers, 12 RBIs, and 3 walks against Toronto pitching. So now they get 5.
He owns that team. Him and Santander. They just own Toronto.
Yeah, and Santander homered earlier in the game.
Yes, he did. But anyway, let's get into your picks.
All right, let's do that. Not a lot of fun games on the board. The Mets got rained out, in case anybody was wondering why we haven't talked about them. They'll play a doubleheader Wednesday. So the guys that you were going to see pitching today, they're pitching tomorrow. It'll be Walker and Keller. The Astros, Scott, Hunter Brown making his major league debut against Martin Perez. We just watched Texas get swept by Boston. Do you have any faith in the Rangers in this one?
The only faith I had was them employing Dallas Keuchel, and they unfortunately designated him for assignment. So the Keuchel era is dead again. It was a hell of a ride. Hopefully you ended up backing the team total with me on Friday because that was a hell of a time. But
yeah, I had the first 5.
That was a good time. Either way, I feel like Houston and the Dodgers, the main thing that really separates them from other teams based on just public perception, it seems like every prospect they have turns to gold. Like they have no misses of any prospects ever, and every single young guy they call up turns out to be very good. I'm just assuming Brown shuts them down in this one. I know nothing about the kid, but Texas is awful, and Houston's still a very good team.
Brown. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say Houston didn't exactly look great against the Angels. I think they get back on track.
Yeah, Brown, 23 appearances, 14 starts for Sugarland down in AAA in the Pacific Coast League, 9-4, a 255 earned run average, a 1.085 whip, 45 walks, 134 strikeouts, and just 5 homers allowed in 106 innings.
That's not bad.
Not bad for a fifth-round pick in
I'm
the
saying.
2019 draft.
Houston and Los Angeles, they're just really, really good at developing prospects.
Yeah, and they're also really, really good at cutting bait on a guy right before his shelf date comes up. Look at all the guys the Dodgers have
really,
ditched.
really well.
Yeah, look at all the guys the Dodgers have ditched that then shit the bed.
Yep.
This is my fun pick of the day: the Calgary Stampeders. This line actually was a lot higher last night. It was 13. It's down to 11.5. I have no idea why. Edmonton is terrible. They have a -10 turnover differential. They don't have Kenny Lawler, their number 1 receiver. Arsenault is not playing. He's their number 2 receiver. James Wilder's not playing for Edmonton. And Jake Meyer looked very good for Calgary in the loss to Winnipeg last week.
Wait a second. James Wilder. Is that a
James
running back?
Yep. James Wilder Jr.
Florida State?
Yeah.
Okay.
His dad played for Tampa Bay.
I was going to say, I remember that guy at Florida State. I didn't realize he was a CFL guy. Okay, cool. I remember watching him at Florida State, though. I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah, the Stamps, Meyer was 23 of 28 for 294 and 3 scores against Winnipeg in a 2-point loss last week. In case you're wondering, the last time these two teams met, Scott, week 3, final score, Calgary 49, Edmonton 6.
Yeah, I remember that you liked that game in particular. But Calgary, they're the team that switched quarterbacks, right?
Yep, they went to Mayer over Bo Leve Mitchell.
Haven't they been very good since the quarterback change?
Yeah, like I said, they hung tough against Winnipeg last week, lost by 2. And, we all know Winnipeg is the cream of the crop in the CFL. Not counting that loss to fucking Montreal because
I'm going to say I'm still not picking Winnipeg to win the title. I probably would pick Calgary, to be honest. I like that Calgary team.
Yeah, I liked BC before Rourke got hurt.
Rourke was incredible for them. He's their entire team.
Yeah. Andrew said Igo lost the first set 6-2.
Upset brewing.
Yep, and Aaron Judge homered.
He's so damn good, man. He's so good. What a player.
I'm going to go with the Padres over the Diamondbacks. Blake Snell against Ryan Nelson. You know anything about Ryan Nelson?
Is that Jeff Nelson's cousin or something? No, I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Apparently, he's been around since 2017. I didn't know that
either. That's
a
problem, because if I don't know about you and you've been around since 2017, it means you haven't been around for that long.
He's been good. Well, no, let me rephrase that. He has a good record in the minors. 10-5 this year for Reno. That's the good news. His ERA. The bad news, his ERA is 5.43.
He's 10-5 with a 5+ ERA.
Yep.
Is he Drew Hutchinson Jr.? Is he the run support king?
He must be. Gave up 25 homers in 136 innings.
Yeah.
Reno somehow has a winning record. They've scored 739 runs and given up 701.
Jesus. Okay. So they're the Mariners from last year.
In 129 games. So they're averaging 5+ a game, or 5 closer to 6 a game, and giving up.
That means every game they have is like 11 runs.
Yeah, I'm just looking at their pitchers. Let's see. They got a guy that's 5-11 with a 6.69 ERA. Tyler Gilbert has 7.57. Yeah, these numbers are horrible.
This is about the Padres game, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm looking at the run line for them. Arizona, they were solid against the Brewers over the weekend. It also helps when you have Gallen pitching, and Gallen is just so good.
Took him yesterday.
I've been praising Gallen for years, even during the Back to the Window show. I've always been a Gallen guy, and it's nice that his what is his inning streak at now? Like 39 41 and a third. Like he's been incredible. Unfortunately, though, he's not pitching tonight. So
he pitched yesterday. So that's why I took him.
That's what I'm saying. So I'll go with San Diego in this one as well.
Andrew said they still have Iga at -200.
Is she up a break already in the second, or what's the story?
No, he means after the 6-2. They still had her at -200.
I don't agree with that.
I was going to say, it seems a bit high.
I know that Swiatek is definitely a better player than Niemer, but I don't trust her. So.
All right, then we got the Dodgers and the Giants. The Giants showed signs of life over the weekend. They did sweep the Phillies.
I'm proud of them. They can't beat the Dodgers.
That's what to say. It's Logan Webb, but it's Logan Webb on the road.
He also hasn't been good for the past month and change.
I guess Andrew Heaney, who's surprisingly been good.
Yeah, another former Yankee that randomly does well when he leaves.
And, when he goes somewhere else, he'll suck again. But
yeah.
Do you have any faith in the Giants?
I think the only faith is if Webb pitches a gem. But the Giants won 3 straight. They're still not going to make the playoffs or anything. But the Dodgers are a machine. And you look at the head-to-head meetings, the Dodgers have dominated. They've won what? Like each of the last 8 meetings, 7 meetings? Like post All-Star break, I believe the Dodgers are 7-0 against this team.
That sounds right because they beat the crap out of them right coming out of the All-Star break, and then they beat them like a week later.
Yeah, so I got the Dodgers. The Giants just can't beat this team.
To your point, they've lost the last – it was actually 8. They had 2 4-game series back-to-back.
Yeah.
So, 8 straight coming out of the All-Star break. In those games, the Giants scored a total of – let's see.
7, I don't think it was that bad offensively. It
wasn't
good.
They scored 23 runs in 8 games.
Okay, it's like the Yankees.
And 6 of them came in 1 game.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, unfortunately, they gave up 9-5, 4-7, 8-9, 3-5. So not good nights there, including a game where Logan Webb got beat at Oracle by Heaney, 8-2 on August 1st. So we can move on here. Stanton got hurt swinging, according to AJ's.
Are you really surprised?
No. Well, apparently you're not.
He gets injured every year. I mean,
he already was injured.
It's a bad contract because he's injured too much. I mean, it's self-explanatory.
Scott, are you concerned at all here? Because I have the Mariners. Are you concerned that they had to fly back after sweeping Cleveland after the long rain delay and everything yesterday?
It's not ideal when the White Sox have been okay lately. I know that they did lose the finale against Minnesota yesterday, but I don't know how Seattle's plus money in any game.
It's Lance Lynn going against Marco Gonzalez.
I mean, Lynn has been good for the past month or so, but, I mean, Seattle's been a machine for the past 2 months.
Yeah, 6 straight wins, I think, coming into this one.
I gotta like the Mariners. Marco's not exactly great, but Seattle just finds ways to win games, and Cervais is probably going to win Manager of the Year. I'll go with him.
This is a weird one. The Cardinals, Jack Flaherty coming off the shelf, but can you really trust Anibal Sanchez and the Nationals?
Sanchez actually been pretty good his last 3-4 times out. It was a very, very interesting game to actually break down. I have a play of the day on it. I actually took the Nationals team total over for this matchup. It was at 2.5 at -130.
Yeah, that seems low because Flaherty wasn't great before he got hurt.
I took Sanchez out of the equation, but Flaherty's off the IL. He was in AA or AAA for the last for 5 rehab starts. I just don't know how it's 2.5. So I took the over. I think I disagree with you on this actual game. I get the argument because the Cardinals are very, very good. They're surging, and they've basically wrapped up the division on a bow. They gained another game yesterday. Yep. I can't lay 250 with a pitcher who has been such a question mark for the last year and change. So,
but on the flip side, they do have a good bullpen.
They do, but 250 for a team starting a starting pitcher that I really don't like in this matchup, I think is a little bit overpriced.
I can see that.
I think it's a Nationals or pass, especially after they beat the Mets twice. It's like plus 250 over the weekend. I think that price is too high.
I think they're hungover. That's why,
It could be. They might be hungover. I hope they lose 4-3. Then we're both happy. But I just think that 250 is way too big of a price for a pitcher who's just coming off the IL.
Yeah, I was surprised it was that high myself. I thought it was going to be lower than that.
Yeah.
The Angels over the Tigers. Jose Suarez going against Tyler Alexander.
Alexander's not good.
If you want to take Suarez as a strikeout prop, you could do that too.
I don't mind Suarez. His overall numbers aren't good, but for the past month and change, he's actually been pretty good.
Yeah, he looked pretty good. Was it his last start or was it a couple starts ago?
He's been good for the past month.
He Handcuff the Yankees.
Yeah, I can do that.
Well, that's true, but yeah, Suarez was 1-4 of his last 6 coming into this one.
I'm going to look through the numbers, but I know that his bad stats were mostly front-loaded. To go through the past month, last 30 days, 23 and 2/3 innings pitched, 3.04 ERA. He's been good.
And Detroit is not good.
No, they're bad.
His strikeout prop is somewhere between 4.5, or if you think he can go over 5.5, you can get it plus 100. He struck out 6 Yankees in his last start.
Yeah.
So he's got that going for him. And the Tigers, we know there's plenty of strikeouts in that lineup. And Waka over 16.5 outs. He's made 4 starts since coming off the IL. Lowest number of outs he's recorded is 17. Tampa Bay still isn't a team that can hit.
Even against Tampa a couple starts ago, he wasn't good. 6 innings, 4 runs. He still won 6 innings. So
right. Andrew said Aaron Judge reminds him of Herman Munster when he tried out for the Dodgers. Anything you want to say about that?
No, that's before my time.
Well, Scott, the A team was before your time too.
Yes, it was.
MacGyver.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Shot in the dark. How about Corey Seager over 1.5 total bases as the Rangers take on the rookie in Brown. Then on the flip side, I had to go with Gurriel because apparently Jordan Alvarez is still out with a hand issue. Apparently he's got Luis Robert syndrome or something.
Yeah, Gurriel was awful to start the year. He's been better lately, so I don't mind it if you want to ride the hot hand.
Yeah, Mookie Betts over 1.5 total bases. It's still a plus money.
Hitter in the league.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Xander Bogaerts. He's talking about a guy that's been on a roll, Scott. Bogaerts has been
good,
knocking the ball around a late.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he's got something like his total base numbers in recent games were rather ridiculous. You take a look here. Last 10, 5. Then he had an 0 for day against Tampa Bay. Then 3-2, 3-6, 2, 3, and 4. Yet somehow he's at plus 132. I know you're playing in Tampa. I know you're playing in Tampa Bay, but come on. Mm-hmm. He also doubled in 5 of his last 6 games. So, and he's got at least 2 hits in 9 of his last 10. So, got that going for you too. I don't know if he's a plus 240 to get at least 2 hits tonight.
That's just a good deal for how well Bogaerts has seen the ball.
Yeah, it's too bad Boston's still a game below 500 and pretty much, on life support. Paul Goldschmidt, what can you say about him, Scott?
He's a very, very good player, and he's going to win MVP.
Dynamite drop-in money, that broadcasting school really paid off.
Just being honest.
The Royals over the Guardians, I agonized back and forth about this when I wrote the game yesterday. I leaned towards Cleveland, but then I looked and saw Cleveland scored 4 runs combined in their last 5 games.
They got killed by Seattle.
Yeah, they did. Weekend. I want to know who came up with the brilliant idea that Robbie Ray should have only been like a minus 120 favorite against Xavier Curry on Saturday. Because
that the extra inning game or no?
No, that was the game they won 4-0.
Okay, the extra inning game was Sunday. Okay.
Yeah. Perez, I think he'll stick around to get over 4.5 strikeouts. There's still some holes in that Houston lineup, especially towards the bottom of it. It's kind of like you always talk about with the Yankees with all those guys that do nothing.
AJS Pools is going for 700, not 500.
Yep.
He hit 500. He hit 500 like 8 years ago.
Lance Lynn, I like to go over 6.5 strikeouts. I think he'll keep the White Sox in the game, but like you said before, that White Sox bullpen is horrible.
Yeah.
Snell over 7.5 strikeouts. It's Arizona. They don't have a ton of good guys in their lineup that you can count on. I'm going to look for Singer to go over 4.5. I know Cleveland doesn't strike out a lot, but God, they look awful lately. And I just can't put any faith in the Guardians' bats at the moment. Even you don't even see Jose Ramirez on the list. That tells you how bad things have gone for the Guardians.
Yep. I still think they're going to win the division, but it's not pretty.
Yeah, what are they? Were they even going into today now? Yeah, even with the Twins, both 4 games over 500. The White Sox 2 back.
Yeah, they're roughly even. I know the White Sox are hanging in there, but I do think the White Sox kind of needed that sweep over the weekend and lost on Sunday.
I mean, what a bad division. I mean, Minnesota had their
It's
chance
so
to
bad.
run away, had their chance to run away before, and then didn't. And
I want
Cleveland
people
had.
to. I want a midseason ruling where the Orioles get transported into this division and they win the division by default.
Well, I mean, they'd be up by several games at this point.
That's what I'm saying.
Just a horrible division all around. I mean, I know people crap on the NL Central and stuff because there's the Brewers and there's the Cardinals and then there's bad teams below it, but still, at least the Cardinals have done something of substance as far as winning games. I mean, here the best team in the division is 4 games above 500.
Yeah, it's a really, really bad division.
It's like the NFC East.
Yep.
Good Lord,
all right.
that's just.
Besides all that, though, anything else you want to add, or should we wrap it up?
I think we got everything in there. Like we always say with the shot in the dark, you don't have to bet them all. Just pick the ones that work for you.
Yep, that's definitely true. Bet a couple. I definitely see a lot of plays that I do like from the shot in the dark parlay. But we'll be back once again tomorrow to talk about the Tuesday card and to recap some college football. Not sure when we'll actually get into the NFL breakdown stuff because, of course, we also have college on the weekend, so I'm sure we'll figure out some time to do it. Maybe sometime during the week, but stay tuned for that. However, until next time, good luck to all of you and all your bets. Bye, everyone.